Hello and welcome. It is now time to
Study to show yourself approved.
with your presenter, Brother Hector Delva.
Greetings, one and all, and let me take this opportunity to welcome all of you to our Bible study for this evening. My name is Hector, and once again, I will be your presenter for our session. We have lots to talk about, and of course, you can see that the topic that we're going to be looking at mainly is Mark of the Beast of Revelation 13 and also 17. And its implications for the SDA Church. The mark of the beast, Revelation 13 and 17, and its implications for the SDA Church. That's what we're going to be looking at. Now, those of us who are going according to our lessons in the quarterly, we see that this is basically along the same line that we are studying the quarterly. And I think the mark of the beast is more pronounced in next week's quarterly. So we're going to touch a little bit about it. About that topic. And then we're going to also look at another phase of that topic sometime next week. One of the reasons why we're going to do that is because this is a very important topic. This is very important because I think that all of the evidence shows that the things associated with the mark of the beast are almost fully in place. They're almost fully in place. And so we need to be very keen, especially how we relate to the whole subject. And it is something that we should all basically understand. Now, I propose to do a little survey. And I want to ask some basic questions. And they're very basic. I'm talking about nothing that requires any elaboration. Now, the questions that I want to ask, of course, this is within the parameters of Seventh-day Adventists. So if you're not a Seventh-day Adventist and you find yourself on this platform, then that's fine, but this is really for Seventh-day Adventists. Okay, so the first question I'm going to ask you, is, which entity or individual do we associate with the number 666? And the next question that I'm going to ask is, the mark of the beast, is that something that's going on right now? Right now, today, is the mark of the beast going on right now? That's a very simple question, yes or no. This is just a survey. We as Seventh-day Adventists ought to have an idea as to what we believe. Okay, and the last question is, the sealing that's mentioned in the book of Revelation, chapter 7, and also chapter 14. Is that something that is significant to us as Adventists? Should we pay attention to it? How say ye? That's the question. The sealing mentioned in the book of Revelation, chapter 7, and also chapter 14. Is that something that is significant to us as Adventists? Should we pay attention to it? As I mentioned, we will be studying the topic Mark of the Beast of Revelation 13 and 17 and its implications for the SDA Church. We are encouraging all of you to have any type of paper, device, or whatever the case may be, to take notes. Even though we will be quoting scriptures and they will be on the screen, we want you to have your Bible, we want you to have your references from the Spirit of Prophecy, and you will be able to check for yourself. Even if you're not checking at the same time, take the references so that you can do so afterwards. Accept nothing that the presenter says. Treat the presenter as suspicious. This is something which we promote and we tell you to be like the Bereans. The apostles went throughout Jerusalem as they studied with the people. Those individuals in Thessalonica, they accepted the apostles and they listened to what they say and they took it, they gobbled it down as the gospel. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for some reason, those in Berea, they felt like, okay, it doesn't matter. These may be great men of God, but we're going to check to see whether these things are so. We're going to get started with our study at this time. We're going to pray, but before we pray, we are going to read a prayer thought. Okay, okay. Okay, all right, our thought for some reason was not put on the, it was not put on the screen. And so you must forgive me for that, but you can take the reference from where the thought is coming from. Okay, our thought will be coming from, as a matter of fact, we're going to be looking at a very short prayer thought from the book of, we're going to take it from the Bible, as a matter of fact. And the thought is coming from the book of Acts, chapter 17. Book of Acts, chapter 17. And we're going to be looking at verse numbers. Okay, we're going to be looking at verse number 10, 11, and 12. Acts chapter 17, verse numbers 10, 11, and 12. That's our prayer thought before we pray. And it says, and the brethren immediately sent away Paul and Silas by night unto Berea, who coming thither went into the synagogue of the Jews. These were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness of mind and searched the scriptures daily whether those things were so. Therefore, many of them believed, also of honorable women which were Greeks, and of men, not a few. Okay, so that is our brief prayer thought. And this is one of the reasons why we are encouraging you to check, is because we are admonished to do so according to the scriptures. Okay, let's have a word of prayer and we get started officially. Our Father and our God, we pause once again to thank you for your blessings that you've bestowed upon us as a people. We thank you for the opportunity and the privilege that you've given us to come and share and to discuss your word. Father, we realize that we are living in the end times, and the subjects that we are following and that we're researching has to do with us as a people directly. As we go into our study, Lord, we ask that your Holy Spirit may continue to lead, guide, and direct us. Envelop each one of us collectively and individually, and lead our minds unto all that has to do with righteousness. We pray your blessings upon us, and as we discuss, may your will be done. For we ask these in Jesus' wonderful and precious name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. Okay, before we get started, the book of Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24. I want you can take note of this as well. I think everybody is quite aware that Matthew chapter 24 is a discourse that Jesus had with his disciples, and they actually wanted to know a little bit more about the end times and also just prior to his coming. And I want to just go through one of the first things that Jesus said to them. And this is one of the reasons why I'm emphasizing this so much. Jesus had a discourse, and in verse number 3, Matthew chapter 24, verse number 3. And he sat upon the Mount of Olives. The disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and at the end of the world? Obviously, they asked about something that pertained to the end of the world, the time that we feel like we are living in right now. Jesus was asked about that. And here's what Jesus said. The first thing that he said, and Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nations shall rise against nations, and kingdom against kingdoms. And there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. And these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you. And ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. But it seemed as if Jesus was so concerned about the deceptions that would be rampant during the end times. Jesus mentioned it at least 3 to 4 times. And so one of the things that we need to make sure is that we are not deceived. And that's one of the reasons why we are admonishing you to study to show yourselves approved. Now we're going to go into the book of Daniel. The mark of the beast is something as Seventh-day Adventists, have its roots, its foundation in the book of Daniel. We are admonished to study both books. One is a complement of the other. So the foundation of what we're going to be looking at is laid in the book of Daniel, and it's further developed in the book of Revelation. I also want us to take note that the exposition of scriptures that we have adopted in our understanding of many of the prophecies, I think they should be coming from the Bible and the spirit of prophecy, but it seems as if we have adopted the ideas of ordinary writers, and we have acted on and accepted some of the things that they wrote as the gospel, as it were. We're going to look at 1 or 2 of the expositions by Uriah Smith. Uriah Smith is one of the theologians that we have actually embraced, and some of the things that he mentioned we have adopted. And so when I say we, I'm talking in the context of the Adventist Church. And so we need to look at that and to see whether his understanding is consistent with what the Pen of Inspiration says and also what the Bible says. So all of these things are in the mix, and I want us to now take a look at the book of Daniel. We're going in the book of Daniel, and we're going to look at a reasonably understood passage that most of us can relate to. Our first passage takes us in the book of Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. And then we're looking at the origin of the beasts and their meanings. Those beasts that are mentioned in the book of Daniel chapter 7, we're going to take a look at that. And we're going to see exactly how they impact us as we transition in the book of Revelation. Daniel chapter 7, we're going to read verses 2 to 4. And it says, Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Okay, that is something that we are all familiar with. Let's continue. Now we're going to read verses 5 and 6 of Daniel 7, and it says, and behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side. And it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. So that's 2 beasts, the lion and the bear. Verse 6 says, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. So we have a third beast mentioned, the lion, the bear, and the 4-headed leopard. Okay? And then we're going to read verses 7 and 8. And it says, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Verse 8, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Now, how do we relate to those beasts that were spoken of and the ensuing descriptions? The 4 winds striving upon the great sea, what does that mean? Of course, in the book of Revelation chapter 17, that's something that we should always keep into our mind, because it actually helps us to appreciate what the understanding of some of these symbolic terms are. Revelation 17 and 15, it says, the waters are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So these waters that are mentioned, or the great sea, the 4 winds striving upon the great sea. Winds are a symbol of strife and commotion, of course, as we are aware, the four winds of heaven striving upon the great sea represents the terrible scenes of conquest and revolution by which kingdoms have attained to power. And that's a quotation taken from The Great Controversy, page 439 at paragraph 3. So to put it simply, the beasts that we spoke of are four kings, or the word kingdoms are used interchangeably. And so it shows us a progressive state of four kingdoms that should have arisen from the earth. Now, the four beasts which we mentioned, let's go ahead and investigate them a little further. As a matter of fact, before we go into them, we know as Adventists, because we're not going to spend too much time on these beasts, we know that the four winds and those beasts represent Babylon, that's the lion, Medo-Persia, the bear, that's raised upon one side, Greece, the four-headed leopard, and the great nondescript beast, dreadful and terrible and exceedingly strong with great iron teeth. That is the one that's actually referencing the kingdom of Rome. The kingdom of Rome in its two phases. If you look at the kingdom of Rome in its primary stage and then in its secondary stage, the secondary stage demonstrates that it has a horned head that emerged, a horned head that emerged. That's significant, and I think we ought to understand that. Now, let's go into it a little bit. This nondescript beast, which was diverse, is a beast, of course, is Rome, the Roman Empire, because it was Rome that conquered the Grecian Empire. The 10 horns are 10 kings that were to arise out of the Roman Empire. And that's according to Daniel chapter 7, verses 24. The little horn points to the rise of the papacy. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25. The second phase of the nondescript beast. So that little horn had eyes and a mouth, which actually is a head combination. So that horn head is very important. It's one of the linchpins of the foundation for this study. And of course, we know that that little horn head plucked up 3 of the horns. And that's according to Daniel chapter 7, verse 20 to 24. Those 3 horns that were plucked up by the horn head combination were the Herulites, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths. Those were the barbarian tribes that were around during that time. And when the little horn, which came about, that was a horn head combination. And it was that horn head that was responsible for eliminating 3 of the horns. Now we know that that is the Roman system of government. One of the reasons why the Bible describes it as nondescript was because it was a mixture of pagan and Christian and Jewish laws. No one could actually describe it, and hence the name emerged. The first phase of the beast was pagan Rome, of course, as we know. The second phase was ecclesiastical or papal Rome. The 3 plucked up horns. The 3 plucked up horns. Of course, we know that I just mentioned that a while ago. All right. So that is something that's very important. Now, one of the reasons why we are looking at that is because that horn-head combination is the one that was tyrannical, that was responsible for the annihilation of all of those individuals during the Dark Ages. They were responsible for the martyrdom of a whole lot of the people at that time for their faith. So that was a very important thing that had taken place. This little horn head combination is a church-state combination. When the church actually would have yielded its power to the state and they became one, they then looked at anybody who dissented their doctrines, and they used the arms of the state to persecute them. And of course, the state did not rest with anything. They persecuted, they punished, they killed. This was the means that took place. Of course, we know that the Roman Empire was responsible. The papacy emerged, and the papacy was responsible for all of those things. When we look at Daniel chapter 7, 25, thereabouts, we can see that those things were predicted. That is the same horn-head combination that was responsible for the killing and also for creating the Sunday law. That is, the horn-head combination was the one who eventually emerged with this Sunday law, as it were. It was the papacy who was responsible, and the Bible predicted that it would think to change times and laws. It annihilated the saints of God, and it did practice and prospered. And then, of course, it attacked the sanctuary by bringing up its own priesthood. And of course, we have a whole lot of things that were done, and God permitted those things to take place. And that's one of the reasons why, as Adventists, we need to know exactly how this affects us, because we see that in short order, there's something that's going to arise that's going to be very similar. Very similar. Okay, so let's now go to the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation. Why are we going to the book of Revelation? We've actually spoken a bit about the book of Daniel to the extent where we have a pretty good idea as to what took place then. Now, I want to transition to the book of Revelation simply because some of the things that we're going to go through are not necessarily things that we usually focus on, but I want us to just go through it so that we'll understand. Now, the book of Revelation chapter 13, that's something that we are familiar with. Book of Revelation chapter 13, no doubt we are familiar with that. Revelation chapter 13, we're going to read the first 10 verses. The first screen has the first 5, and the second screen will have the second 5. But this here is something that we should also note. And it says, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. Okay, let's go to the next screen. Verse 6 to 10 says, and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. That definitely is something that we're familiar with. We've read that. And of course, our understanding of that is what we may not have actually elaborated upon. So let's go and take a look at how ought we relate to this particular subject. And let's go and take it piece by piece. Now, this leopard-like beast, some refer to it as a composite beast. Why? Because it has a composition of all of the beasts that were before it. Those beasts were mentioned in the book of Daniel. So that's something that we ought to know. Now, these, as we can see, this particular beast, the composite beast or the leopard-like beast, synonymous terms, it came from the sea or the old country. And of course, that's where the world's population was. That basically in Europe. All of those things actually started there. And like the fourth beast of Daniel chapter 7, 1 through 8, and is composed of them in its head, feet, and body and horns, showing it to be a descendant of these ancient empires, characterizing our world today. So the beast of Revelation chapter 13, we need to now understand that it is a whole beast. This is referring to an entire beast. Now, there are several components of this beast that we should be familiar with, but this is a beast. Daniel, when we reference the lion, back in those days, the lion represented those who were ruling the world at that time. And they were eventually conquered by the Medo-Persians. And of course, the Medo-Persians were the ones who were on the scene. They were responsible for the then known world at the time. The Grecians came about, and then of course the Roman Empire. The then known world was, as they came about and they assimilated, as they dethroned those other nations, they assimilated them, and then they became the extreme power. So it constituted the then known world at that time. This particular beast here represents the world that we live in today, particularly emphasizing the Western culture or the Western world, because this is a beast that has 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns. And so the combination suggests that it's the entire world. It's not an entity. We've been led to believe that this particular beast is talking about the papacy. This is too much for one entity. Because as we look at this particular beast very carefully, we're going to discover that the papacy, while I agree that it is a part of this beast, but it doesn't represent the entire beast. As we look into, let's go down a little bit, as we look into Daniel chapter 7 and 8, the horn-head combination depicted by the papacy was a religious body clothed with civil power. Therefore, the wounded head of Revelation 13 and 3 depicts the papacy deprived of its civil authority. That was due to the Reformation. That is something that maybe we may not have actually focused on as a church. Horn-head combination was the papacy. What made it so dangerous was that it was the church who yielded up its power to the state, and as a result, the tyrannical engine that was formed was responsible for the death and persecution of people who dissented. They did not want to agree with their religious faith, and as a result, persecution came about. This was prominent. And what afforded that to take place? The fact that they had the backing of the state, the military power. If you didn't believe what we taught in the church, we put the military on you and we kill you. And that was basically what was going on, particularly during that time. So all of the great persecution that was around during that time, especially that were under the auspices of the papacy, that was because there was the church-state combination. The church and state were acting as one. But now when we look on this particular beast here, we see that this beast is represented as the beast having 7 heads. And one of the heads was wounded. That wounded head, we submit, is talking about the papacy. And why does it actually take on that form? Because the horn is stripped of it. So it's now relegated to the same head that the rest of the 6 heads have. But only one thing is that this particular head, without the horn power, is a wounded or a head that has a deadly wound. So the papacy at that particular time was ineffective because the horn had been removed. This is something that we need to know. So the 6 uninjured heads, therefore, represent the rest of the Protestant churches that emerged during the time the papacy was reigning. So the 7 heads that are mentioned in this particular prophecy in the book of Revelation chapter 13 is talking about the Christendom in its entirety, the multi-sectarian world. In other words, all of the churches, all of the Protestant churches in particular. So those 6 heads, they amount to the Protestant churches that emerged. They were protesting against the things that the papacy was actually talking about. And as a result, we know that the papacy started to wane in power. And we know that the Reformation was eventually responsible for the demise of the papacy. The Reformation. Now I know that some of us are going to say, wait, hey, hold on. I know that it was Berthier who was responsible for the demise of the papacy because he took the Pope into custody. Yes, we're going to get into that. But we'll see that that was not responsible for the demise of the papacy. There is a part of the prophecy that speaks about how that particular entity came to its demise, but we're going to look a little closer. Now, that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to make sure to take your notes. Let's go into a little bit more. Look at this beast, this leopard-like beast, or this composite beast. This beast, according to Revelation 13, is said to have the symbol of blasphemy written over the heads. Now, what does blasphemy actually refer to? Blasphemy, according to the book of Revelation chapter 2 and 9, is to reject the messages of God and thus commit the unpardonable sin. So blasphemy is to reject God's message that is sent to you as a church. Read Revelation 2 and 9, and you'll see that that's exactly what that's referring to. By the decree of the second angel's message, Revelation 14 and 8, Protestantism fell, causing the deadly wound it inflicted on the papacy to heal. And then, of course, the world, inclusive of all of the churches, wandered after the beast or partook of the spirit of the beast. Now, is this beast still relevant now? Yes, it is. Does this beast have all of the churches combined on it? Yes. Is the SDA church a part of this beast? Yes. Because 7 is a number associated with completeness. All of the churches, especially the Protestant churches, are represented on this particular beast, inclusive of the SDA church. So how is it that the SDA church has the name of blasphemy written on top of it? Because it actually partook of the worldliness that the other that the other churches actually did when they rejected the messages sent from God. So are we saying that this is Babylon? No, the church has never turned Babylon. But the church, by actually embracing the cultures and all of the different pagan institutions of the church, of the world, that is, sorry, then that is something that is following after the worldliness that's really a part of this system. So these incidents brought the blasphemy over all 7 of the heads, depicting Christianity under apostasy. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 4 and verse 1, that's also something that you can read. You'll see that that's prophesied. In the Great Controversy page number 388, Great Controversy page 388, she actually mentions that that is exactly what that's referring to. So we are not exempt in any way. As a matter of fact, we are supposed to be the champions in the cause of bringing about the Protestantism, but you'll soon find that we have not been faithful, as are the rest of those individuals in the other Protestant churches. And as a result, we now find ourselves under the same banner of blasphemy. Verse 4 of Revelation 13 says, and they worship the dragon. And of course, we know that the dragon is talking about the devil. In the book of Revelation chapter 12, verse 4 through 7, I think that's clearly highlighted that the dragon is the devil. They worship the dragon. How do they profess? How do those Christians worship the dragon or the devil? They worship the dragon inspired institutions under the guise of Christianity. For example, Sunday worship. Sunday worship is something which we saw came about from Daniel's feast, and that was something that was born by the papacy. And how are we embracing that as churches? We are worshiping something that came up as a result of the dragon-led apostasy. And so we're actually worshiping the dragon in that regard. And how else? Worship the dragon-inspired institutions of those pagan-originated holidays, Christmas, Easter, all of the holidays that we've actually taken into consideration that were heathen in nature. The book of Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 1 to 5 speaks about the church not learning after the ways of the heathen. And so by embracing the heathen customs and all the heathen traditions, we have put ourselves under the guise of worshiping the devil. Because it is him who inspired those heathen to bring those things into the church. And we've compromised and we've allowed those things to come into the church. And so this here is showing us the subtlety. This here is showing us how the enemy was able to even get the church of God under the guise, worshiping him and not even realizing it. What are some of the things that we embrace in addition to Christmas and Easter and all of those other holidays? As a matter of fact, we just finished Mother's Day, and we see that that's a species of idolatry. And then, of course, Father's Day is coming up next week. We're going to embrace that. Most of our churches, if not all, are going to bring that particular holiday or that whatever it's referred to as. We're going to bring that into the Sabbath, and that makes it even more objectionable. The actual day is on a Sunday, but as Adventists, we are bringing it further. We are bringing it into the Sabbath, and we're going to uplift that day under the guise of actually keeping the fathers or the mothers obedience to them. But we don't need an entity or a day when the 10 Commandments actually tells us exactly how we ought to relate to our parents. Honor your father and your mother. That's something that should be done daily, not something that is done on an annual basis for the main purpose of economic interest and economic gain, but has a heathen twist. And then we're now going to bring that into our church. All of those things show us that we are actually a part of that blasphemy, that worshiping the enemy as a result of our practices that we've embraced. Okay, now let's go into a little bit more. And I'm taking a little bit of time, and even if we have to go into a part 2, I want us to understand this, because some of the things we are not getting into all of this in the quarterly. And this is something that I thought would be fitting for us to understand, so that as we go into the studies in the quarterly, we'll see exactly what inspiration says and how is it that some of the things are being skipped over that may be of some significance to us. Now, let's go and look at what do the 42 months of blasphemy of Revelation 13, 5-7 actually reveal. Its period of blasphemy is the same as Daniel's fourth beast. Daniel 7, 8-25, in its second phase, ecclesiastical Rome. And of course, we know that that is something which highlights the 1260 days. And actually, we know that that's referring to the 1260 literal years of the Dark Ages. So that is talking about 42 months. As we change the months into 30 days, we'll see that they add up to 42 literal months if we actually worked out the equation. 42 literal months would would be equivalent to the 1260 actual literal days, years. And so that is something to show us that what was happening in the book of Daniel is actually was happening at the same time and is mentioned in the book of Revelation. Here is something that we need to now understand. Daniel saw an aspect of the prophecy that showed the highlight of the papacy coming into power, coming into its heyday, very strong at that particular time, especially when the church capitulated and gave their power to the state and they joined forces. Daniel saw that. He saw how they became a tyrannical power. And so Daniel's version of the papacy is slightly different. Why? Because this here part of the prophecy in the book of Revelation, John the Revelator is looking at it from a different perspective. Therefore, before it received the deadly wound, that's this particular papacy, this particular beast here, before it received the deadly wound, it reigned contemporaneously or coexisted with the little horn head. So this beast of Revelation chapter 13 is basically the same continuation. Daniel saw the start of it, and John the Revelator is looking at the end result. So John the Revelator is saying, I see one of those heads wounded, and that wounded head is talking about the papacy. But Daniel is saying, I saw the papacy strong. So something took place in between there. And the Bible didn't fully mention, and this is where history brings about what took place during this time. Now, how did this wounded head come about? After the infliction of its wound, the horn and head was separated, and the papacy was deprived of its civil power, which I mentioned already, and relegated to a common religious power, which is a head. So all of those heads within this beast are represented by religious powers. Thus, it depicts the world after the fall of pagan Rome. So this beast is talking about the world as we now have it, and the beast, I mean the world, and the papacy now at a position where it's not effective because it has been stripped of its power. And this is how John the Revelator is seeing it and relating to it. So we need to make the connection. And so let's go and look at now, how is it that this deadly wound came about? Now, I agree that the Pope being taken captive is a part of the prophecy. But what part of it? Let's look carefully and let's look at what is said in the prophecy. It says, the prediction, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. That's according to Revelation chapter 13 and 10. That was fulfilled in 1798 when the Pope was taken captive by the French army on Berthier. We can read that in Great Controversy, page 439. So, yes, what was fulfilled when Berthier took the Pope into captivity and he died a year later? The part of the prophecy that's highlighting Revelation chapter 13, verse 10. And Inspiration declares that that part of it was fulfilled. Not the deadly wound, Revelation 13:3, that highlights the deadly wound, that did not take place when the Pope was taken captive. Because if the Pope had still the power of the state, then obviously the French army would not have been in any position to do anything, because that was the world power at that time. And so obviously something must have taken place to wean that power from the papacy. And I submitted that it was the Reformation. And of course, as we examine some of the scriptures and also examine some of the Pen of Inspiration's quotes, we'll see that that's exactly what took place. And so let's read a few quotes. Had it not been for the wounded state of the papacy due to the activities of the Protestant Reformation, the Pope would not have been in prison. Let's read a statement from the Great Controversy, and this is something that I want you to either screenshot or look at the references. Great Controversy, page 155, at paragraph 1. It says very clearly, through Luther's, we know that Martin Luther was one of the champions of the cause of the Reformation. Through Luther's instrumentality, Rome was already descending from her throne. But we see that Luther was one of the individuals responsible for the descending of the Roman Empire. Great Controversy, page 162, at paragraph number 1, it says, by the power of truth, the papacy had sustained a defeat which would be felt among all nations and in all ages. So the truth that came out from the Reformation is what really caused the deadly wound on the papacy. Let's look at another statement found. Great Controversy, page 190, paragraph 1 says, the word Luther preached overthrew popery. And that's very definite, and it's very important, because these are the statements that we should be familiar with that constitute how the actual deadly wound came about. And if you want a statement that actually dealt specifically, that actually mentions a dreadful blow, look at Testimonies for the Church, volume number 1, at page 373. And it says, Luther dealt a most dreadful blow to the papacy. All of those things show us that the papacy came to its demise when the Reformation came about. And as one church went off the scene, so to speak, the other church came and kept that momentum going. When we came on the scene, we should have actually done a whole lot more, but we see that the Bible declares that the deadly wound was healed. So protesting against the falsehoods of the Catholic Church is what eventually brought a healing to that deadly wound. And that's something that we should be familiar with, because this is something that we don't usually go into any substance. So what does the leopard-like beast actually reveal? Let's look at some of the highlights of the leopard-like beast versus those beasts in Daniel chapter 7. The leopard-like beast actually reveals the fall of the Roman monarchy. The leopard-like beast also revealed the Reformation. It also reveals the wounding of the papacy. And I think now we've demonstrated the evidence that it's not the taking into captivity that constituted the deadly wound, but it is only a part of the prophecy that shows he that is taken into captivity, he that led into captivity is taken into captivity. But the deadly wound was caused by the Reformation. And then, of course, this part of it shows the rise of Protestantism. This piece also showed the captivity of the Pope. And of course, that part of it that spoke about, that's Revelation chapter 13 and 10. He that taketh into captivity, that part of it was fulfilled when the Pope was taken captive. Then it also represents the world before the wound, that's before the deadly wound of the papacy. And then it also is referencing the world during the deadly wound. And then, of course, it is showing that the world after the papacy's wound was healed. Thus, while Daniel's beast shows the rise of the papacy, John the Revelator saw this composite beast that shows the fall of the papacy. That is something, brethren, that we will pause at this time, and we will now just reflect a little bit, because that's something which we need to take into consideration. And I hope that you would have written all of those references. And this is actually being recorded, so if you want a copy of it, you can get it. But this is something that we don't usually focus on. As a matter of fact, let me just getting a bit heated. This is something which we don't usually focus on. And let me just get rid of something here. Just give me a second here. Okay, I'm sorry for that little break there, but these are some of the things that we need to look at. This is something which was somewhat of a mouthful. Now, what I want us to do too is to look at this particular part of prophecy. We have actually taken what we've read so far, and what we have deduced from all that we've read is that the papacy is that entire beast. Do you believe that? That's the prevailing thought. That's the prevailing belief in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, that piece of Revelation chapter 13 that highlights what we just spoke about is the papacy. And do you see how much rich history, how much rich information that cannot just simply just go away just like that, because we have looked at it from a very narrow point of view? The Bible is talking with so many different things. This is a characteristic of the entire world, but we've actually said that this is the papacy. But what I want us also to do now, as we go a little further, let me see how the time is looking. I don't want to, okay. I want us to now look at, this is the same Revelation chapter 13. Now, Revelation chapter 13 introduces another beast. Revelation chapter 13, I repeat, introduces another beast. So we're going to go into that, and we're going to look at the significance of this other beast that's now being mentioned. So we're looking at two beasts. What we have done as a church is we have amalgamated those two beasts, and we treat it as one. And hence we come up with the conclusion that the papacy that we've actually taken for granted as that entire beast is the one who is going to enforce the mark of the beast system. Because as we continue to read now, we'll see that it mentions the beast that has that mark. Let's go now into Revelation chapter 13. We're going to read from verse 11 through 18. And we see that it's introducing another beast. It's not the same beast. Revelation 13 and 11 says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon." So the introduction of this other beast in the prophecy of Revelation chapter 13 shows that we have two different entities being portrayed here. So we cannot treat them as one. What is this next entity that just came up? This next entity that just came up is, in fact, talking about the United States of America. The United States of America. How do I know that? The Great Controversy, page 440, it says, "What nation of the New World was in 1798 rising into power, giving promise of strength and greatness and attracting the attention of the world? The application of the symbol admits of no question. One nation, and only one, meets the specifications of this prophecy. It points unmistakably to the United States of America. The beast was seen coming up out of the earth, and according to the translators, the word here rendered coming up literally signifies to grow or spring up as a plant. And as we have seen, the nation must arise in territory previously unoccupied. So this beast is seen coming up not out of the sea as the previous ones, or as the one mentioned in the previous part of it, Revelation 13, 1 through 10, but this one here is coming up out of the earth. When we look at this, when we look at our Bibles, we'll see here it says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth." So the origin of this beast here is a different one from the one of the previous one mentioned in verses 1 through 10. So it definitely shows us that it's talking about a different beast. And this beast here is talking about the United States of America, like I mentioned a while ago. Okay, so now let's look at the characteristics of this particular beast. This beast here has two lamb-like horns, or two horns. As a matter of fact, let's look what it says. "I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and spake as a dragon." Now, let's look at those characteristics, and let's look at how they are explained. The two lamb-like horns, what do they represent? We're going to let inspiration speak again. We won't just simply determine what it says without actually looking at how inspiration ought to relate to it. Great Controversy, page 441. "And he had two horns like a lamb." The lamb-like horns indicate youth, innocence, and gentleness, fitly representing the character of the United States when presented to the prophet as coming up in 1798. Among the Christian exiles who first fled to the America and sought an asylum from royal oppression and priestly intolerance were many who determined to establish a government upon the broad foundation of civil and religious liberty. Their views found place in the Declaration of Independence, which sets forth the great truth that all men are created equal and endowed with the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This obviously is something which we know based on the American Constitution, and of course, based on what Inspiration is saying here. This is something representing the United States of America and what it stands for. So this piece here is significant. The United States of America, it is a beast that had lamb-like horns, but the Bible says it later spake as a dragon. Let's go ahead and look at what the lamb-like horns also represent as well. Great Controversy, page 441. It continues and it says, and the Constitution guarantees to the people the right of self-government, providing that representatives elected by the popular vote shall enact and administer the laws. Freedom of religious faith was also granted, every man being permitted to worship God according to the dictates of his conscience. Republicanism and Protestantism become the fundamental principles of the nation. These principles are the secret of its power and prosperity. The oppressed and downtrodden throughout Christendom have turned to this land with interest and hope. Millions have sought its shores, and the United States has risen to a place among the most powerful nations of the world. And that is in fact so. The United States still is on record as being the richest, the most powerful, and most influential country in the world. Now, even though some people may argue that it's in the process of decline, and there's a lot of things happening with the US dollar and all of that, but still, this country here is, according to the prophecy, to the point where it's very influential. It has it's among the most powerful countries in the world. Okay, so let's leave it like that for now. Now, so its two horns represent republicanism and Protestantism, or Republicans and Democrats. The lamb-like horns indicate youth and innocence or gentleness. And then, of course, those references are given already in Great Controversy, page 441. Now, Bible says, and it later spake as a dragon. And how will the nations speak as a dragon? Great Controversy, page 442. The lamb-like horns and dragon voice of the symbol points to a striking contradiction between the profession and the practice of the nation, thus represented. The speaking of the nation is the action of its legislative and judicial authorities. By such action, it will give the lie to those liberal and peaceful principles which it has put forth as the foundation of its policy. So, judiciary and the legislative, they're the ones now who are speaking. Now, when we look in the Great Controversy, page 442, which is referenced a while ago, we see that there is something that's going to take place. And of course, we'll see how the United States actually play into the whole thing. Now, let's go into Revelation 13, verse 12. And it says, and he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Now, this is talking about the United States. This is not talking about the beast that we've mistaken for the papacy only. This is talking about this United States, and it's talking about now, it is saying here that this beast, the United States, exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. So, based on what that is saying in and of itself, we see that this causing the individuals, causing the world to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed, is something the United States does. We have embraced something that was written by, and we'll go into it as we go a little further. Our views on this particular aspect of the beast shows that this is something which takes place by the papacy once again. But this does not say that this beast is referencing the United States. It says, the prediction that it will speak as a dragon and exercise all the power of the first beast plainly foretells a development of the spirit of intolerance and persecution that was manifested by the nations represented by the dragon and the leopard-like beast, and the statement that the beast with two horns caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast indicate that the authority of this nation, referring to the United States, is to be exercised in enforcing some observance which shall be an act of homage to the papacy. So this is something that we need to make sure that we have right. We have the view, and we're looking for the Pope. Many people have actually gone on record by saying that the Pope is soon to do something. And the Pope, everybody's following the Pope wherever he goes. As Adventists, we cannot do that. The prophecy is showing us who will be responsible for the enactment and the enforcement of the mark of the beast in these modern ages, I should say. When the papacy did it in the book of Daniel, that was the horn-head combination, church-state combination. We see that something similar is going to take place. That's one of the reasons why the Bible is speaking directly to the United States of America in these voices. Now, who is the first beast before it? The first beast before the lamb-like beast is not necessarily talking about this part of the prophecy. So it's not talking about the beast, the composite beast, because the composite beast shows the fall of the papacy. It's talking about the beast that's highlighted in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, that shows the rise of the papacy when it was fully clothed with the powers of the state. So the United States is eventually going to bring about a system that is going to be similar to what the papacy did back in its heyday when it was clothed with the horn-head combination. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's look at another statement. And it says, this is Revelation 13, verses 13 and 14. And it says, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by the sword and did live. Now look at what's being said here. There are two individuals now in the picture here. And he doeth great wonders. Is this he referencing the United States? No. This he here is another individual who is now being introduced. It's not a beast. We'll see exactly who this individual is, because this individual is the one who doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And then it goes on and it says, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. So this is not talking about that beast or the United States of America. We're talking about a third individual or a second individual that arose in the prophecy. We're going to get to that individual, but it shows that this is another part of the prophecy that we may have overlooked. Inspiration in making this here, explaining this, she says, this is in Great Controversy, page 553, she says, it was by satanic aid that Pharaoh's magicians were enabled to counterfeit the work of God. Paul testified that before the second advent of Christ, there will be a similar manifestations of satanic power. And the Apostle John, describing the miracle working power that will be manifested in the last days, declare, he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do. No mere impostures are here foretold. Men are deceived by the miracles which Satan's agents have power to do, not which they pretend to do. So this individual who will eventually come about doing miracles is doing it in the sight of the beast. In other words, there's going to be a collaboration of that individual and the beast. The beast obviously is the one that's clothed with the two horns. But this individual here is coming working miracles. So we're looking here at an individual who is representative of a spiritual or a church-related type of union with this beast. And this individual is the one that's doing the miracles. Now, if we want to know exactly, let me just see here. If we want to know exactly who that individual is, if we turn our Bibles to Revelation chapter 19, Revelation chapter 19 and 20, and it says, the false prophet, the beast and the false prophet are the ones that are mentioned. Revelation 19:20 says, the false prophet is the one who wrought the miracles in the sight of the beast. He must be a future charismatic religious leader who will work miracles through the power of Satan and deceive the world in accepting the mark of the beast. This reveals a national alliance of church and state, this false prophet and the beast. As his doctrines cannot be fully supported by the scriptures, miracles are performed to secure the confidence of the masses, to complete the deception. Satan will appear as an angel of light, healing diseases, and at the same time working as a destroyer. That's a statement taken from Great Controversy, page 589. So this false prophet that's spoken about in the book of Revelation 19 and 20, is that the papacy as we have been taught? Everybody is the papacy as far as we are concerned, it seems. But we say that that false prophet is also the papacy. Is that false prophet the papacy, or is that false prophet the devil? The false prophet is not the devil. In Revelation 16 and 13, 3 unclean spirits came out of the mouth of the dragon, which is the devil, the beast, and the false prophet. So that false prophet cannot be the devil. And of course, the false prophet is not the papacy. So we see that these figures that arise now are things that we've been taught to, or that we believe are all a part of the papacy. But these are different entities that will be involved in this thing that is soon to break loose on the world. But it's coming, it's going to be manifested, and it's going to be enforced by the United States of America. So these things are things that we should always try to remember. Is the false prophet the Pope? No, because we see that the false prophet comes to his end before, along with the beast, before the destruction of the Pope. The destruction of the Pope, or the man of sin, takes place at the second coming of Christ. But we see that the book of Revelation, chapter 19, highlights that the beast and the false prophet are thrown into the lake of fire. And this happens before the second coming of Christ. So this here is showing us that there is a difference between all of these different entities mentioned and individuals mentioned. And so we need to remember that these things are not necessarily as we may have thought them to be. We're going to read verses 15 through 18, and it says, "And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed." So this here is talking about now the United States. It went back to the United States of America. And it is this entity, the United States of America, shall have power to give life unto the image of the beast. Why do they call it an image of the beast? Because this entity replicates what took place in the Dark Ages. And so inspiration uses the right term, causes that as many as was not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So the image is now being recreated or created. Why do they call it an image? Because the same thing that took place in the Dark Ages is being recreated. The intolerance that existed back then is now being manifested in the United States of America. And they're going to create that image of what took place back in the Dark Ages. Verse 16 says, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads." So this entity, the United States of America, is what actually caused all these things to take place. This is the one who is the driving force. This is the one who is dealing with all of these. Verse 17 says, "And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark of the beast, or the number," sorry, let me just reread that. "And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." Here is wisdom. "Let him that had understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. The Bible, brethren, puts the 666 on the United States of America. I don't know if you have looked at that. The emergence of this other beast, which we've now solidified, that is the United States of America. This is the part of the prophecy that's being highlighted here. The United States of America is the one who constitute the individual, the state. So the person in charge of this, the entity of that particular beast would be the ruler of that one, which would be the whoever the ruler is, the head of the United States of America, which would be the president. That, according to inspiration or according to the Bible, that is who will have the number 666. Now, of course, we were taught otherwise. We say that's the Pope. It is the Pope who have the 666. If you look in his mitre, you'll see that that's what the number says. Yes, we were taught that. But this here is talking something totally different. Inspiration or the Bible puts it on the United States of America, not the Pope. As a matter of fact, we're going to look at one or two statements before we close with that. Great Controversy, page 443, making an image of the beast. What does that mean? How does that look? Great Controversy, page 443 says, but what is the image to the beast, and how is it to be formed? The image is made by the two-horned beast and is an image to the beast. It is also called an image of the beast. Then, to learn what the image is like, how it is formed, we must study the characteristics of the beast itself, which is the papacy in its infancy stage, if I may add, because we're going back to the book of Daniel, when the horn-head combination came about. That's what the image, that's why we took a little while in the book of Daniel, because Daniel's prophecy showed the horn-head combination. Revelation, that composite beast, does not show the beast or the papacy in its heyday. It shows the demise of the papacy. So we have to go to the book of Daniel when the horn-head combination, that is what we need to study, and that's what we studied initially. That was the foundation. When the early church became corrupted by the departing from the simplicity of the gospel and accepting the heathen rites and customs, she lost the spirit and power of God. And in order to control the consciences of the people, she sought the support of the secular power. The result was the papacy. And of course, we're talking about the papacy at its strongest point. A church that controlled the power of the state and employed it to further her own ends, especially for the punishment of heresy. In order for the United States to form an image of the beast, the religious power must so control the civil government that the authority of the state will also be employed by the church to accomplish her own ends. And that is something that comes about as a result of the United States and her legislative and judicial processes now enacting laws that will punish anybody who dissents based on what they propose to do. And we know that they are going to legislate Sunday law and make it mandatory. Okay, let's go ahead and read something further. How the US forms the image. Let's go ahead and continue. It says, when the leading churches in the United States, when the leading churches, so this is Protestantism. The leading churches in the United States, uniting upon such points of doctrine as are held by them in common, shall influence the state to enforce their decrees and to sustain their institutions. Then Protestant America will have formed an image of the Roman hierarchy, and the infliction of civil penalties upon dissenters will inevitably result. So Protestant America, the Protestant churches is what brings this about, not the Catholic Church. Now they bring about an institution started by the Catholics, yes. So the Catholics are behind it, and of course the devil is behind everything. But it is that church state institution that the devil found so effective back in the heyday of the papacy that will be recreated, hence the image of the beast, and not the actual mark of the beast as it were. Back in those days, that foundation has been dealt with and cemented by the papacy, yes, but the driving force in terms of enforcement, that is something that's given to the United States of America. The papacy is relevant insofar as it still has some influence, of course. But this is now an institution of the papacy that's going to be enforced because it is them who with the day itself. So yes, they are part of it, but they're not the driving force. They're not the engine behind the thing. The United States of America is the one that's actually a part of this thing. That is the one that's going to be driving it. Now let's go ahead and look at enforcing the institution of the papacy. And this is where Great Controversy, page 588 says, through the two great errors, the immortality of the soul and Sunday sacredness, Satan will bring the people under his deceptions. While the former lays the foundation of spiritualism, the latter creates a bond of sympathy with Rome. The Protestants of the United States will be foremost in stretching her hands across the gulf to grasp the hand of spiritualism. They will reach over the abyss to clasp hands with the Roman power, and under the influence of the threefold union, this country will follow in the steps of Rome in trampling on the rights of conscience. Wow. So we see like a movie being recreated with different actors for the same end result. When that takes place, that is when there will be this woman mentioned in the book of Revelation, chapter 17. That is when she will mount the beast and control the beast. And in the book of Revelation, chapter 17, that woman is going to be during the time of the mark of the beast. Now, let's go ahead and look at another statement that shows us that this is something that has to be enforced first. It has to be enforced first before the woman is realized. It says, this, the U.S. enforcing the institution of the papacy. It says in Testimonies, volume 5, page 451, by the decree enforcing the institution of the papacy in violation of the law of God, our nation will disconnect herself fully from righteousness. When Protestantism shall stretch her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of Roman power, when she shall reach over the abyss to clasp hands with spiritualism, then under the influence of the threefold union of our country shall repudiate every principle of the Constitution as a Protestant and Republican government, and shall make provisions for the propagation of papal falsehoods and delusions, then we may know that the time has come for the marvelous working of Satan, and that the end is near. When this would have taken place, brethren, there's something which we should also be aware of. Let's continue this part first. Testimonies, volume 6, foreign nations will follow the lead of the United States. Testimonies, volume 6, page 395 says, the less we make direct charges against the authorities and powers, the greater work she shall be able to accomplish, both in America and in foreign countries. Foreign nations will follow the example of the United States. Though she leads out, yet the same crisis will come upon our people in all parts of the world. So it starts, brethren, in the United States of America. Papacy is a very small little country. I mean, that's the Vatican. 1 mile square. It has very little small army. They could never achieve this. You need a big engine like the United States of America with the most powerful army, with the most influential economy. You need the big players to be a part of this. The papacy would have laid the foundation, and it is them who are a part of the planning and all of the different, all of those things. But the United States of America are the ones who are bringing this whole thing into reality. Mark of the beast. It says, page 446, Great Controversy. The special characteristics of the beast and therefore of his image is the breaking of God's commandment. Says Daniel of the little horn, the papacy, he shall think to change times and laws. This is the foundation that the papacy would have laid, Daniel 7:25. And Paul styled the same power, the man of sin, who was to exalt himself above God. One prophecy is a complement of the other. Only by changing God's law could the papacy exalt itself above God. Whoever should understandingly keep the law as thus changed would be giving supreme honor to that power by which the change was made. Such an act of obedience to papal laws would be a mark of allegiance to the Pope in the place of God. And that's a very serious statement. Mark of the beast. Once again, it continues. It says, as the sign of the authority of the Catholic Church, papist writers cite the very act of changing the Sabbath into Sunday, which Protestants allow of because by keeping Sunday, they acknowledge the Church's power to ordain feasts and to command them under sin. Henry Touberville, an abridgment of the Christian Doctrine, page 58. What then is the change of the Sabbath but the sign or mark of the authority of the Roman Church, the mark of the beast? Satan is controlling, and of course, he would have done so very subtly. Let's read Revelation 13, 17, and 18. It says, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that has the mark, number of the name, sorry, the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. That beast and that man, United States of America. And then, of course, it's a world power. The two-horned beast is a world power. It exercises all the power which the first beast, the leopard-like, exercised, compelling all the inhabitants of the earth, except those, of course, whose names are written in the Lamb Book of Life, to worship the commands and to implement a likeness of the church and state government that is as outdated and as are the Middle Ages themselves. This power is to control the world's markets. So we see that this particular entity is going to control the world's markets as well. There is a statement taken from Word to the Little Flock. That's a little publication that was written by James and Ellen White. On page number 12 of that publication, it says, Michael is to stand up at the time that last power in chapter 11 comes to its end. Chapter 11 of chapter 11 of chapter 11 of the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel comes to its end, and none to help him. This power is the last that treads down the true church of God. And as the church is still trodden down and cast out by all Christendom, it follows that the last oppressive power has not come to its end, and Michael has not stood up. This last power that treads down the saints is brought to view in Revelation 13, verses 11 through 18. That is something that perhaps was read, but not examined carefully. Because yes, it does mention Revelation 13. And we have actually taken that Revelation 13 and we've made a blanket application to include the part of it that speaks about the 666. But only from verse 11 through 18, which highlights the United States of America, is the one that's going to be responsible for the 666. And that is the one, according to inspiration, once again. Now, let me just go through one or two things before we close here. This is something that Uriah Smith is the one who wrote the book Daniel and Revelation. And that is the book that we've used to adopt and embrace most of our doctrines as far as prophecy is concerned. This is what he says. He says, the prophet now takes up more particularly the subject of this great Babylon, and in order to give a full presentation of it, goes back and gives some of the facts of her past history. That this apostate woman, and he's referring to in the book of Revelation, chapter 17, and this apostate woman, as presented in the chapter, is a symbol of the Roman Catholic Church. Is generally believed by Protestants. Between this church and the kings of the earth, there has been an illicit connection, and with the wine of her fornication and her false doctrines, the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk, church and state. The prophecy is more definite than others applicable to the Roman power in that it distinguishes between church and state. We have the woman, the church, seated up the scarlet-colored beast. And once again, we're saying that this woman is the Catholic Church. But that woman, as was mentioned in last week's study, predates the Catholic Church. That woman is the beginning of the false religious institution, all of them that were responsible for the martyrdom of all of those martyrs, beginning even with Abel. So from the time that Cain and Abel were around, this woman that brought about the falsehoods and eventually slew Abel, this woman was formed from that point, the institution that brought about false religious ideologies. This woman didn't just come up during the papacy. This woman is the mother. The papacy is one of the daughters of this woman, but the papacy is not the woman itself. Okay, let me just show you again what we have actually embraced. And this is something that was written by Uriah Smith in his book, Daniel and Revelation, page 474. The most plausible name we have ever seen suggests as containing the number of the beast is the title which the Pope applies to himself and allows others to apply to him. That title is Vicarius Filii Dei, or Vicarius Filii Dei, Vice Regent of the Son of God, taking the letters out of the title which the Latin uses as numerals, giving them their numerical value. We have just 666. That is something that we've embraced. That is something that we teach. When we go to crusades, we teach the people that this is in fact talking about the Pope. But this, brethren, is not talking about the Pope. This is something that's why we needed to sit down and reason. Because if we are continually propagating something which is not fully supported by the Bible, then we're going to be in trouble. At the end of the day, we're going to be looking at going in a false direction when these things do start to take place. And so this here, brethren, is something that we need to take a look at. This is not exhausted in any way. When this comes about, some of us are of the view that we have to flee to the woods and flee to the country. When this comes about is a time when the church, unfortunately, will not be around. Stay tuned for part 2 of this particular study. And as we go into the study for this week, going into next week's Sabbath, we'll see that this is a part of it that may not necessarily be focused on but this is something that we all should know. I took the time to kind of, make sure that we have all the references to try to explain exactly how the foundation has been laid and how the mark of the beast will be coming up, who are the players involved, etc., so that we may not be deceived. Christ told us not to be deceived in so many different ways. He said that. So, brethren, this is, in fact, the end of our study for today. A next component of the study will be, why do I say that the church, as we understand it, will not be here during this time, during the mark of the beast? Because that's a very important statement that we need to look into as well.
Thank you for visiting this Bible study channel. For comments or questions, please feel free to leave your email address at hdelva@gmail.com or delvadaphne06@gmail.com. Or you can call or WhatsApp us at 1-242-439-7629. God bless you all.